So last time we ended up kind of talking about essentially the process of going through puberty, becoming sexually mature, and what was happening with us and how we were beginning to understand what sex was. Going into high school, I think I speak for both of us when I say that we both did understand what sex was.
I did, yes.
And were very enticed by the idea of it. But the other thing that was happening was we were getting very serious about our Christian faith. Like that was something that was happening, you know, you got the pamphlet, I didn't get the talk, but what I did get was my parents you had me in church and they had me in a youth group and they had a good idea of what was being taught in said youth group. And they were talking, our youth pastors were talking, you know, pretty directly and not explicitly, but directly about sex. And so it wasn't like we were just walking around having no idea what we were supposed to be doing. They were taking the steps to connect what was being said in the Bible with like, okay, but what does this mean for 1990 kids? And we were just soaking it up.
It was very much don't have sex until you get married. And here are the reasons why, a lot of which I've already gone over. I remember we talked about, but then how far is too far? You know, we'd be given books and we'd have conversations about, and it would be analogies like, well, don't get so close to the edge of a cliff that you might fall off. You want to stay back from that cliff a good number of yards at least in order to protect yourself from what might be near that cliff, which would be an accidental falling over.
And the campaign around.
And so it was like, don't do anything if you can help it.
But the campaign around like keeping you from the act of sex, you covered a lot of that with sort of the spiritual stuff and sort of the biblical framework that was added on. I would say the other piece of this is something that was very common, which is there was this sort of information, or might I say misinformation, that was added onto it from a practical perspective. Things like condoms are not effective, right? Like it wasn't like, okay, well condoms are like 99% effective when used properly. It was like, no. Condoms are not effective. Condoms are not the answer. In fact, the HIV virus which is repetitive, it's like saying ATM machine, I understand, could go right through a condom because it's so small. Things like that are actually not true, that you begin to absorb. You're like, well, my friends are having sex using condoms, but I already know that like basically they might as well be having sex without condoms because I know that those are not effective. Like it was that sort of misinformation that began to take place. Even things, and this is a little bit later that we started getting this information, but the idea that even the birth control pill was capable of inducing abortions. Do you remember this?
Oh yeah.
I actually held on to this belief well into even the beginning of our marriage. It's the reason that Jesse didn't go on birth control pills was because
it would prevent the implantation of the fertilized egg in the wall of the placenta.
And since life began at conception, the prevention of implantation of a fertilized egg in the lining of the uterus, that itself is a form of abortion, which is murder, right? I
didn't have to worry about that until I was married. We were engaged, but then I went to the library. Like I started reading things. That's the only time I've gone to the library and pulled out medical books and read stuff and and then took that to my pastor at the time. And basically I was just losing a lot of sleep over that.
Yeah.
And just just trying to get my pastor to tell me, you know what, it's actually, you can go on birth control, it's okay.
Right.
But we didn't. We used condoms for a long time in our marriage.
Yeah, that's all we used up until like a few years ago when I got a vasectomy, because by that point it was like, what, you gonna go on the pill now?
Exactly. Man,
yeah, the reasons changed, but
we waited all that, but we waited so long to have sex without a condom. That's
yeah.
We can come back to
another
that.
thing. Another thing was the idea that if you have sex with somebody, you're having sex with everyone that they've ever had sex with. You know, in terms of, and that's just not a purity culture thing. That's like a 80s and 90s sort of sexual education thing, which is not exactly true.
I mean, there's these cultural constructs of virginity in general that aren't just an evangelical or a Christian thing. That's like, I guess you could care about that. It can make sense that like, oh, I want the first person. You want it to be special. You want it. I think everybody would want their first sexual experience to be special and meaningful. Definitely not a negative experience, but also it seems kind of sweet for it to be, in the least sweet, to be their first and your first. Or, if you have certain opinions about it, it's like I don't want to be second to anybody. But purity culture really leaned into that because it said that like God is there and this is it's implied that it's irreparable.
Yeah.
That there's some sort of damage that is gonna be lasting.
My application to this, getting back to what you were saying with the, well, where do you draw the line? Like, how do you do this? Because we weren't at that point. We'll talk about once we got to college, it got even more explicit and straightforward in terms of being advised as to what you should do and what you shouldn't do. We were still a little bit on our own. We knew we shouldn't have sex, and we knew that they would say it's like lighting a candle. It's like lighting a fuse. And once you light the fuse, the bomb is going to explode, right? So don't even light the fuse.
Meaning like kissing.
Right, well,
or
that was what I'm saying.
Or potentially dating.
It was up to your own interpretation at that point.
Yes.
For me, I did a little bit of like internal thinking on this, and I came up with my own standard. And my own standard was okay, it feels like I can't get AIDS from boobies. And I can't get a girl pregnant by messing with her boobies. Now, I also want to preface this with the fact that I did not have a lot of opportunity. As much as I liked women, I did not have a lot of success with actually convincing any of them to be in a relationship with me. There was, it happened a few times, but it wasn't like I was a Casanova by any means. But in the few relationships that I did have in high school, I think, and again, it's implied, but I'll say it just because consent was always a part of this. It was not something that I was doing to someone. It was something that we were doing together. But I think that a lot of the girls may have been like, wow, he's really into boobies. He must be a boob man. And it's like, well, I'm not really. I like them. I'm not a boob man.
That was you going all the way.
But it was like,
all your way.
That's as much sex as I could have at the time. And so there was a lot of focus on the boobies. Probably excessive, but it was because I had drawn this imaginary line at the waist.
Okay.
And that was my application to that.
But you weren't having conversations with your girlfriends to like about those boundaries?
No, at that point I wasn't saying.
And it was certainly a corrective thing from
I'm not really a boob man, but I'm gonna seem like one. I wasn't having those conversations.
But this was a tightening up of your standards from the previous episode.
Yeah, I had done more at a church lock-in than I was willing to do later. Once my own personal standards started, I started like kind of waking up and saying, oh no, I'm heading down the wrong road.
And listen, we were involved in we were really tight with our youth group within our church, and then we go to high school and we all start dating people, but the people from our youth group, and like there's like this, they're keeping an eye on us, we're keeping an eye on them. There's like this built-in accountability, like, well, that we were kind of all praying together at our church meeting and like agreeing that like, yeah, true love waits, and we're gonna stay as far away from temptation and sexual immorality as we can. So there were other people from other schools and other churches and who were doing different things, and it was easy to say we're not like them. We're gonna serve God. We're serious about this. And if you really love God and He's inside of my body, like I need to honor that. And I'm serious about it. And we were serious about it. We increasingly so. I mean, when we started the band, the Wax Paper Dogs, it was a Christian rock band. We would like preach from the stage, like give an invitation. All the songs were written about our relationships with God in one form or another.
In very weird ways.
In very weird 90s alternative rock ways. But we kind of set ourselves up, first with the youth group and the mission trips we would go on, and just our identity was very wrapped up in our Christianity. And then in being in a band and inviting all of our friends to our concerts by the time we were in our junior year of high school, I mean, we kept holding ourselves to higher and higher standards.
We couldn't be going around having sex with our girlfriends because it would have been super hypocritical. But what we could do, and what I was doing regularly, was masturbating, right? Which again, we had not really started to talk about. Now what we did know is that, you know, Jesus said that even when you just look upon a woman with lust, you basically have had sex with her in your mind, like you're guilty in the same. And so Christians take that verse, which I did not quote, I just paraphrased, and they say basically this is why masturbation is wrong, because in order to masturbate, there's gotta be a lustful sort of seed of a thought that you're acting upon, right? And so masturbation is seen as sinful in most, especially back in the day, but most Christian circles. So
and then when it's something that's wrong, it's something that needs to be confessed, because anytime you sin, you're building a barrier between you and God, that then the way you remove that barrier is you confess your sin, you acknowledge, yes, I did this. I mean, in Catholic circles, they'll go to a priest in the closet, or whatever they call it. But we would just do it in the privacy of our own bedrooms every night before I'd fall asleep. I would say, all right, I need to clear the slate of everything I did that I know of, and I'll also confess the stuff that I don't even know I did, just blanket confession, in order to remove any of that barrier so that I can still have a relationship with God. And then I guess that starts to bleed into so that I can be good, or so that I can experience the benefits of that.
I wasn't
is.
making those connections as much as I was just like, you shouldn't be doing this, and you should feel guilty and shameful when you do it. To the point that I actually remember writing on my ceiling, I had a popcorn ceiling in my room, and I was able to write on my ceiling in pencil. As I'm lying in bed, I can look up and see it, and I wrote, "You better not."
Really?
Yeah.
You better not.
You better not. Masturbate. Didn't write masturbate because I knew that's what I was talking about. Did
that work?
Hell no, it didn't work. I mean, yeah, it would. Here's the thing.
Better not.
This is where we're gonna talk a little bit about shame, because the thing that was happening for me is that you begin to operate in secrecy, because at this point, we'll talk about college in a second, but at high school, we were not confessing to each other or other people about masturbation. We were just struggling with it on our own, feeling horrible. Like the moment that you're done, the clarity that comes, right? Comes is probably not the right word. The clarity that arrives.
I guess there's an evolutionary reason for that. That's like, oh, you better get your wits about you and just be ready to defend yourself.
Yeah.
Or something.
But the clarity that arrives
Mission
in
accomplished.
that moment,
get the hell out, or something.
When you're an evangelical Christian, or just someone who believes that masturbation is wrong, that's where the guilt comes in. That's where the shame comes in, and you keep it to yourself, and then you go back to the struggle.
And it hits you like a brick.
You feel horrible.
It's like back up the truck. And I mean, sometimes you get to a point where it's like you would know you're just seconds away from just being hit with the shame and guilt of it. But it wasn't, I mean, and then that might be enough to say, I would say, I promise I'm never gonna do it again. I don't want this to be the reason that I can't talk to you, God, and that I love you more than this.
But what you're beginning to do is
But then a few days later, here we are again, because it's
biological. That's what happens.
Yeah,
that's why you're back there, not because something's wrong with you, but because
irresistible instinctual draw.
You're a human with sexual desire. Now, And you're also of an age when, from an evolutionary standpoint, you would have been using these tools to propagate the population. I mean, that's just the biological history of it.
But we didn't have any tools to cut ourselves any slack because there was no communication. The only person I was confessing it to was God.
Yeah.
And then I knew that there was grace and forgiveness technically, but I knew what it meant.
I think the bigger thing that was happening,
I think to God.
The thing that became a long-term thing that I feel like is still a part of my brain today is that in a, you know, I read an article recently, I'll make the connection to this in a second, about some urologist was saying, here's why you shouldn't pee in the shower. I was like, well, okay, I pee in the shower on a pretty regular basis. Let me read this. And he was like, the reason you shouldn't pee in the shower is because you're basically reinforcing this Pavlovian response of feeling water on your body or hearing the sound of water making you want to pee. And so this is gonna become more difficult because you're associating this sensation with needing to release the pee. I don't think that's that big of a life problem. If you hear running water and you need to pee, I think you'll be okay. But when you think about when you are masturbating.
Thank you for letting me off the hook with that.
When you are masturbating in this purity culture framework, what you're doing is every single time that you are experiencing sexual pleasure, you are heaping the most intense portion of shame that you have, it is available to you, onto that and associating shame and sex together. Well, and that is not something that you easily get rid of.
No, well, first of all, I'll say, now it makes a whole lot more sense why whenever I hear running water, I jerk off.
Right, exactly. That's I was hoping you would make that connection.
I mean, the shower is the place to be.
Well,
at least that was like, my mom's not gonna walk in the shower and catch me.
Right.
And so I was really concerned about that, especially after leaving the Victoria's Secret out last week.
But soap,
last episode.
But you don't want to get soap, and you don't want to get soap in the urethra. That can cause problems.
Yeah, if we were trading notes, I could have learned that the easy way.